I just bought the brand new Galaxy S24, a decision that I believe to be suboptimal, but it's probably not for the reason that you think. Hello guests, Ritzy Bellhop here. Welcome to Quite Optimal, the show where we discuss the best of everything on a per dollar basis. In this episode, I will be providing for you some guidance by drawing conclusions for the big 4 questions you need to consider when buying your next phone. The big 4 questions are: 1. What is the optimal brand? 2. Is it more optimal to buy the newest model or an older model? 3. Is it more optimal to buy a flagship model or a budget model? And 4. Is it worth the money to get the Plus/Ultra/Pro models? Keep in mind that if this was a review video and I was just like, here's the most optimal phone for 2024, then this video would be outdated in 6 months. But having the answers to these 4 questions will be useful guidelines to you far into the future. Starting with the brand, it is well known that Apple and Samsung have the market locked down in terms of best phone. In fact, I'm sure many of you thought that the S24 was suboptimal because it's not an iPhone, but you'd be wrong. The S24 is actually equivalent in hardware to the iPhone 15 Pro while being $200 cheaper and featuring a smaller camera punch-out on the front screen. And yes, you heard that right, the S24 is more equivalent to the iPhone 15 Pro, not the baseline iPhone, because the S24 and the iPhone Pro both feature a third lens for telephoto shots, something that the baseline iPhone lacks. The only arguments in favor of iPhone have nothing to do with hardware and have everything to do with certain preferences for the user experience. And there are some out there that would say the additional $200 are worth it for the Face ID function or for the Apple ecosystem. But in my experience, the difference between using the 2 phones is negligible. So, Samsung for the win. Or iPhone if the Apple ecosystem makes that big of a difference for you. As for the second question, is it more optimal to buy the newest model of phone, or should you buy an older phone? And if so, how much older are we talking? The answer to this question applies to most lines of phones, but to demonstrate how I found the answer, let's examine just the base S line of phones, starting by comparing the S23 with the S24. The current 128GB S24 retails for $800, but a renewed S23 can be found for $400. Since the S24 is twice as expensive, it would need to be twice as good in order to justify the price tag, but it's not. In fact, the difference between the S24 and S23 is practically non-existent, especially since the new AI features that Samsung developed for the S24 were also pushed out to the S23, making the older model more optimal. And what about a renewed S22? It can be found for $260 on Amazon, which means that the S23 would have to be 50% better to justify the higher price. But it's not. It's at most 10% better, again, making the older model more optimal. Does the pattern continue with the S21? Well, a renewed S21 can be found on Amazon for $180, which means that the 22 would have to be 40% better in order to justify the higher price, but it's not. It's at most 5% better, making the older model more optimal. The pattern doesn't stop until we finally get to the S20, which also costs $180 on Amazon. And since the S21 gives you a little bit more for the same price, it makes the S21 the most optimal S-line phone you can buy right now. I say right now because I've crunched the numbers like this for many years, and the optimal phone to buy at any given time tends to be 3 models back from the current one. So yes, if you're watching this in 2024, then the S21 is the most optimal phone to buy on a per dollar basis. But if you're watching this in 2027, then I lied to you in the thumbnail because the phone that I bought, the S24, is probably the most optimal phone for you to buy. In case you were curious, this 3 models back rule also applies to iPhones. But Ritzy, you say, companies already make budget phones for people who only want to pay $200 for phones. Why wouldn't I just buy one of those? Like the Samsung A25, which came out less than a year ago. Why wouldn't I just buy that? Well, it's because the S21 is simply better than the A25. Yes, the A25 is bigger and it has a better battery life, but the S21 has smaller bezels, it's thinner, its screen is brighter, it can shoot video in 8K and 60 FPS, it has 3 times optical zoom, and its chip scores twice as high on benchmark tests. So our third conclusion is that older flagship phones are more optimal than new budget phones. Now for the fourth question. Is it worth it to pay extra for the premium models of phones like the Ultras and the Pros and the Pluses? Since we've already been looking at the S21 line of phones, let's compare to the S21 Plus and the S21 Ultra. An S21 Plus can be bought on Amazon for $225, making it 25% more expensive than the base model, yet only offers 12% more screen area and 12% longer battery life. So the benefits don't quite justify the costs for the S21 Plus. The math works out even worse for the S21 Ultra. Renewed, it costs $300, nearly twice as much as the base model. Unless the S Pen makes an enormous difference for you in how you use your phone, the S21 Ultra doesn't come close to offering twice as much in terms of hardware or quality of life to justify that high of a price. Conclusion number 4 is that it is not worth it to pay extra for a premium model phone. And there you have it, 4 guidelines to assist you in buying your next phone. No matter what year it is right now, I will keep the link in the description updated to whatever the most optimal phone is right now. And if you'd like to watch more videos on optimal living, I've left them for you just to the right of the hat rack. And should you ever have need of a Ritzy Bellhop again, you can summon me by ringing that secret bell that appears after hitting the subscribe button.